Hey friends, how's it going? Ash here. Welcome back to Gents. This is part 2 of my Mancera fragrance buying guide. If you haven't watched part 1, check that out because I go over 10 completely different fragrances in that video than the 10 I'm going to be talking about here today. I'm going to give you guys kind of a quick rundown on each one of these scents, let you know how they smell, how long they last, about what they cost from discounters, some of the notes. That way you can determine if these fragrances sound interesting enough for you to check out. Mancera is one of those niche fragrances that I think is very easy to get into, but they have a lot of fragrances, which is why I'm doing these guides. Because outside of maybe the most hyped 2 or 3, a lot of the scents that they have don't really get talked about. And typically these are fragrances that are pretty easy to wear, all things considered, don't cost that much if you get them from discounters compared to other niche fragrances, and have good bang for your buck because they have really good projection, good longevity, and a lot of them are compliment getters as well. Each one of the fragrances I'm going to talk about in part 2 will be linked down below in the description. Let's get it kicked off with the first fragrance. And that fragrance is none other than Roses Vene. This one from discounters you can pick up for about $77 as of when I'm shooting this video. Do be aware that depending on which discounter, and also sometimes there will be fluctuations, but depending on which discounter, it may be a little bit less than that or a little bit more than that. But that's sort of the price range that you're gonna be looking at if you wanna pick this fragrance up. At retail, these are more expensive, of course. At discounters, I think they are an amazing buy, which is why I'm giving you that discounted price, because for the most part, that's probably where you should be shopping, just so you don't spend a whole bunch of money that you don't need to. That said, even at full retail, Mancera is actually a pretty good buy, usually. So this has lemon, rose, vanilla, musk, and cedar as some of the notes in the fragrance, and it's been compared to Montal's Intense Cafe. In case you're unaware, Montal and Mancera are actually sister brands, so it makes some sense that this would smell similar to that one. So it has sort of a powdery rose. That vanilla comes through very clearly, which it should. The name is, again, Roses Vene. Has a nice lemon off the top and has kind of a cakey scent profile, like a gourmandy cake kind of scent. It leans feminine, but overall the fragrance itself smells great. The quality there is good. The performance is great, lasts a long time, projects heavily. As it dries down, it has a soft, clean musk and some woods that meld together with the remnants of that kind of vanilla, cakey, powdery rose scent profile from the open and mid. So this is one of those fragrances from Mancera that's not really unknown. It's just not as hyped or talked about as the really big ones from the house, but it is extremely, extremely well done. And for me personally, even though it does get compared to Intense Cafe, between the two, I prefer the way this one smells a little bit more. The next one is typically a little bit more expensive at discounters, around $82 as of this video, and it is Vver Sel, which is one of my favorites from Mancera. I love this stuff. It's got a lot of citrus in there, vetiver, mint, and musk. So this has, I think, lime, bergamot, lemon, and orange as the citrus notes. Like I said, just a whole lot of citrus. This is extremely bright and uplifting when you first spray the fragrance on. It's clean, it's sparkly. The citrus doesn't come across really tart or bitter or anything like that. The mint in there gives it like a green kind of poppiness, additional life to that citrus when you first spray it on. And as it dries down, it's more like a dry, woody vetiver scent profile. You don't get any of that like smoke that you can sometimes get, or earthiness that you can get sometimes from vetiver, depending on how it's used and what type is used. It's somewhat similar in style to fragrances like Tom Ford Great Vetiver or Hermes Terre d'Hermes Eau Très Fraîche, to a lesser extent, maybe Eau Givre, kind of in that family. It doesn't smell the same as any of those fragrances. It's just the way the vetiver is done here is kind of in that style where you have that clean, stripped down, woody vetiver with a really nice citrusy flair to it. Compared to those fragrances, it maybe is a little bit more effervescent, a little bit brighter than those scents, but still kind of in that style. I love this one. I think it's great for just about year-round use. And if you're a fan of vetiver, you should check this out. Up next is what I believe is the cheapest one out of this bunch, at least if you're shopping at discounters, Precious Oud, and you can get this for about $64. I talked about this a little bit on the part 1 of the Mancera fragrance buying guide, but Mancera, again, at discounters is a great buy because this one barely over 60 bucks. Most designer fragrances that are more sought after are more expensive than that, even at discounters. So you're getting a niche fragrance, 120 ml size bottle, so bigger than your average 100 ml size bottle, for barely over 60 bucks. Just really, really good bang for your buck. So this has oud, whiskey, leather, tiramisu, and floral notes in it. Kind of an interesting note breakdown there, and it's really sweet when you first spray this one on. So with that sweetness, you have a boozy flair, of course that whiskey. The tiramisu in here doesn't really come across like coffee. It's more a general chocolatey kind of gourmand feel, and then you have leather underneath all of that. The oud in here has a very faint touch of funkiness to it. Not a whole lot, it's not prominent, but you get a little bit, enough to let you know that it is oud, which to me just keeps it interesting because you have, again, all these sweet notes going on in here. So getting that little kind of sharp edge that hits you from that oud livens it up, makes it more interesting. It's unisex overall. Doesn't really lean too hard one way or the other as far as being a more feminine smelling fragrance or more masculine smelling fragrance. A little bit goes a long way. The performance really, really strong here. Projects heavily, lasts a really long time. And this is that type of scent that will probably grow on you more over time. Because when you first smell it and you get that booziness, that bit of sweetness, that touch of funkiness from the oud, again, not too much, but a little bit, chocolatey tiramisu, leather, florals, there's amber in here, vanilla, just a lot going on. So it's one of those scents that maybe the first time you smell it, you go, I don't know, it's maybe too busy, but then you come back to it and you go, it actually smells really good, especially in the air when it's cold out. And I think for the price point, 64 bucks, like I said before, great buy. Up next, we got one of the more expensive ones, $102 at discounters as of this video, Intense Cedrat Boise. So Cedrat Boise, which I covered in part 1, that is the most popular men's fragrance from Mancera, and this is the Intense Flanker. It's also newer, so that's why it's gonna be more expensive, because it is a flanker of a very popular fragrance, and this one's pretty popular too, sells out at discounters fairly often, so the price is going to be a bit higher. So this has citrus, black currant, leather, and oud as some of the notes in the fragrance, though you don't really pick up much of that oudiness at all in here, so don't worry about that. You also have ambergris and vanilla along with other notes in the scent. Basically, you could think of this as a more robust, bolder, smoother take on the original Cedrat Boise. Opening here smells fantastic. It's a big compliment puller, very versatile. The citrus here is sweet, and then you have a little tartness from the black currant. Again, gives it kind of an interesting flair off the top. It's really, though, leaning more into that sweet side of citrus. It doesn't have any juiciness to me, so it doesn't have that kind of like almost juicy, effervescent sparkle that some citrus openings can have. This is more laying in that sweet side of things instead of that slightly tart, bitter citrus style. You get some tartness from the currant, just not the citrus. You got leather that pops out here, woods that pop out as it dries down. It maintains a little bit of that warmth and sweetness from vanilla in the base, so it's still sweet from the opening into the dry down. It just transitions from more fruits into vanilla. And of course, great performance, which you expect from this house. And this is an intense version, so probably goes without saying that you can expect that from this. It is an extrait de parfum after all, so yeah, you don't have to worry about that. It's gonna last a long time. It's gonna project very heavily, easily get you noticed. Now, for most people, the best bang for your buck is probably the original Cedrat Boise, because when that's in stock at discounters, you can usually pick it up for about 65 bucks. And that's at fragrancebuy.ca. They do sell out though, because the price is so low. But if it's in stock and you can get that for like 65, for most people, that's gonna be a better buy overall, because this is, close to $40 more than that. If price does not matter, if you're not taking that into account, I do think, to my own personal taste, that Intense Cedrat Boise is a little bit better than the original Cedrat Boise, though both are fantastic. You won't go wrong with either. Next up, we have Pearl. This is about $80 from discounters, and it has a different cap, or the top of the cap. This doesn't really matter, but yeah. Pearl. This has fig, apple, bergamot, and peach as some of the notes in the fragrance, along with musk. And this does have a great smelling fig in the opening. That's probably one of the things that really draws people in with this scent. So it's a little green and sweet when you first spray this one on, that fig coming across more prominently than the other fruits that are in here. And then it takes on a floral undertone pretty quickly, rose and jasmine, and that starts to kind of swallow up that fig as the fragrance dries down. And in the dry down, this one has more of a delicate feel to it. So decidedly feminine leaning once it hits that dry down. Fig opening, amazing, love that. And then past that, not one that I reach for myself. Now we got one of the hype beasts from the house, Instant Crush. This one about 90 bucks from discounters, and that is just because so many people are buying it all the time, so the price kind of stays elevated up a little bit more than most of these. Saffron, ginger, amberwood, and rose, some of the notes here, and this one has drawn comparisons to Baccarat Rouge 540 by Maison Francis Kurkdjian. Now you also have in here vanilla, citrus musk, jasmine, a bunch of other notes really. So when you look at the note breakdowns, this one has a much busier note breakdown than Baccarat Rouge 540, but you can still definitely pull out that similarity. And it's especially apparent because of the saffron in the opening, the way that the saffron is used here, really similar to how it's used in BR 540. The opening here is maybe a little more lively than BR 540 because on top of that saffron, you also have ginger, you have citrus, so it's really poppy, very sparkling. And then you have florals that kind of come in and out, waft in and out as the fragrance dries down. You've got vanilla, amber woods that make a nice base for the fragrance, warmth and sweetness coming from that. It's one that leans a little feminine, but it's a huge compliment puller. And lots and lots and lots of guys swear by this one, which is why even though this may lean a little bit feminine, tons and tons of guys wear this one with no issues. So be aware, if you've never smelled this, that it does have what may be considered a little bit of a feminine lean as far as unisex fragrances go, but don't worry about that because this is a massive people pleaser. Also has really good performance as well, as you would expect. So that's why it gets hyped and loved as much as it does. Then we got another intense fragrance, Intense Red Tobacco. So this is to red tobacco as Intense Cedrat Boise is to Cedrat Boise. It's basically doing the same thing to red tobacco that this did to Cedrat Boise. It makes it richer, makes it bolder, smoother, smells higher quality. It's deeper than the original red tobacco. It's darker than the original red tobacco. It doesn't have as much of like a spice explosion off the top. So the original red tobacco, when you first spray it on, the opening can be overwhelming. It can be just too much for some people. This one really does smooth that out and removes a lot of like the sweet spiciness from that opening. This is almost like in between the original red tobacco and Parfums de Marly Carlisle, because it has some parts of it that are maybe leaning closer to what Carlisle does, but then of course it's still red tobacco, so it has other parts that are decidedly red tobacco. But you could kind of slot this in between those two scents in a way. It has richer spices, smells less synthetic, and while it is sweet, it is not as sweet as the original red tobacco. The performance is massive. This lasts forever. It projects heavily. So once again, this is a fragrance that's gonna go a long way as far as bang for buck. And I didn't cover the notes here. There's a bunch of them. There's pear, there's cinnamon, there's oud, there's tobacco, there's leather in here. There's also incense, vanilla, saffron. The one issue with this is that you can't really find this at discounters. It'll pop up and sell out very quickly. So this one right now, you would probably have to buy at retail. And this one retails for $200. You can get it from Twisted Lily for $180. If you use the code GENTS10, that will give you 10% off. So that'll bring it down a little bit, but that's what you're looking at price-wise for this right now. Of course, as time goes on, it will eventually pop up at discounters and stay there, but as of when I'm filming this, not yet. Then we have Black Vanilla, 73 bucks from discounters for this one. And I gotta say, out of everything that we're gonna talk about here today, this is probably my least favorite. Now the note breakdown's kind of interesting. It has peach, it has coconut, It's got vanilla, of course, because it's called black vanilla. You have black currant, you have musk in there, and you have floral notes also. So the issue with this one is that the vanilla is pretty powdery. In Rose's Vene over here, there's a good amount of vanilla and it has a touch of powder, but the vanilla smells much richer and deeper. Here in black vanilla, it smells more powdery, and then the coconut comes across synthetic, almost like a hairspray kind of vibe going on, like synthetic candy mixed with hairspray in a way, and I just don't really like that opening. To me, it just doesn't smell pleasant, doesn't smell very nice. It does have a feminine lean to it, so unisex leaning feminine, but again, even if a lady was wearing this, I wouldn't think it smelled good. I would just be like, oh, that is something. That's, yeah. Now as it dries down, the hairspray kind of thing goes away, and then it's just like a sugary powdered vanilla with florals, but still not a fan of this one. Performance is good though, so got that going for it. Then a couple of my smaller bottles here, Fig Ecstasy. Now I should say the price that I've been giving you on these fragrances has been for a 120 ml size bottle, but some of them you can find at 60 ml sizes at discounters, and it really will depend on the fragrance. Sometimes the 60 ml will be a lot cheaper, and then maybe it makes sense to get one because you're not gonna use the whole bottle. Other times it's like $3 less, depending on the discounter, and at that point, just get the larger size. And I gotta say, while this one online appears to be a little bit divisive, like some people, you know, they don't really go for it, and other people really enjoy it, I'm in the camp of really enjoying it. I think it smells great. It's green, it's woody. The problem with some people is they want this to be a very juicy, very sweet fig, where that fig is just like full bore in your face, right? And that's not what this is. Even though it's called Fig Ecstasy, that's not what you're getting here. While it still smells like fig, it's, as I said, a green fig and has a good amount of woods in there, almost a light earthiness underneath it when you first spray it on. So it's not super sweet. It's a little bit dry, actually, kind of creamy. And then as it dries down, you get some vanilla that comes out and a little tonka, and you may think, oh, well, maybe it sweetens up there in the dry down, but compared to most Mancera fragrances, it really doesn't. So you get a little leather that comes out there, along with the vanilla, along with the tonka, and those woods that you can pick up early on. So for me, this is one that I think is great. Like I said, spring, fall, potentially summer and winter, depending on what you're doing, how much you spray on. But I think it's one that gets overlooked, and it's because the fig doesn't deliver in the way that a number of people would enjoy, which makes sense because fig is one of those notes where if you like it, you really like it and you want a bunch of it. And it's called Fig Ecstasy, so you're thinking, oh, this is gonna be a fig bomb, then it's not, and you go, what? Stupid. All right, last but not least, Amber Fever. This one about 77 from discounters. Another interesting note breakdown here, caramel, whiskey, amber, rose in there as well, hazelnut. Then you also have some tonka and musk. And truly, kind of similar to what's going on here with Fig Ecstasy, it's called Amber Fever. So you're thinking just a big resinous bomb, potentially, you know, very warm and sweet with just a sticky, ooey gooey amber kind of going through it. Not really what it is. Now it's sweet and boozy off the top, little gourmand as well because of the caramel that's in there, and you have some florals around the edge, but it doesn't come across really like a heavy amber forward scent. Opens up kind of unisex as it dries down, becomes more masculine as you get some woods that come out mixed together with all those sweet notes from the opening, those boozy and gourmand notes off the top. And it's also drawn some comparisons to Instant Crush. Some people think it smells a little bit similar to that one. I don't think they're super close, but you can maybe pick out some similarities between the two. I will say though, that between those two, the Amber Fever does lean more mature smelling overall. Not quite as in your face sweet as Instant Crush. And I would say for most people, Instant Crush would be the better buy of the two, just as far as versatility and complement factor. That said, Amber Fever is still a pretty solid scent, but I can't put it up there with my favorites that I've talked about here today, some of the other ones. So there we go, part 2 of the Mancera buying guide, 10 more fragrances from the house. So there There are a lot more. I'll try to do part 3 before too long and maybe tackle some other houses in the interim as well. But there we go, 10 more. So that's 20 Mancera fragrances down. Thank you guys for hanging with me. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you guys later.